Hi everyone. Today we're going to be working in an Office 365 environment and we're going to be building a workflow to pull some data out of another list so that we can do something with it. Now what you see before you is a manager's list. I have two records in there, one being the record for Eden and his manager Brett, and then a record for myself, Vadim, and my manager being Eden. In this particular scenario, you can see at the top right, I'm actually logged in as myself. Now what I'm going to be doing is actually building a workflow to get that data out of this particular list so that I can do something with it. So think of this as a scenario where I initiate some event that causes a workflow to kick off, and then I want to do something like assign a task to the manager of the person who kicked off that workflow. Now, whereas in an on-premise environment, there are a number of ways to do it. In the Office 365, there's also a number of ways to do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to first jump to a workflow on another list. Here we have a workflow list called the NW Get Manager from List. Pretty descriptive there. And what I have is I have a set workflow variable action and also log in the history list action. For the variables, I just have a simple text variable with the text manager being the name. Again, as with the on-premise, I kind of like to make sure when I build my workflows and I create variables that I always put the type of the variable in there. It just makes it a little bit easier later on, especially with the new variable types that you have in Office 365 environment. It's a little bit easier for you to get your head around what variables you're working with if you know their type straight away just from their name. So we'll close this off, and what we do is we're going to open up the set workflow variable action. You see we've selected for the variable the text manager variable. Now what I'm going to do here is actually click on this advanced lookup, and what I'll be doing is an actual list lookup. I go to my managers list. I'm going to pull out the manager because that's what I'm interested in. And the filtering is based on the user. And you can actually see here, I've got my field user and my field manager. And for the user, we're actually going to look up the workflow context. And in there is a property called initiator. Now, make sure that when you actually fill this in, when you do this advanced lookup, that you click on this insert reference, this insert button. So what we're doing here is we're doing a lookup to the managers list. We're going to pull out the manager field where the user in that record is equal to the initiator of this particular workflow. So we click on insert and you see the little red label there and you click on save. Now we're going to publish this workflow and we'll try it out, we'll run it, make sure that that particular thing works. The log in the history list action that I have at the workflow simply logs that text manager variable just to make sure. So it's basically a little bit of debugging to make sure this workflow is doing what I expect. I'll open that up just to make sure I'm putting in the initiator's display name, manager is, and then I've got my variable there. So let's jump to the actual get manager list and we're going to run this workflow. Let's jump back into the workflow history. Here's the running workflow. It should be fairly quick. So we'll refresh this, and there you go. It says completed, and you can see it says Vadim Tabakman's manager is, and then this is just basically the description of the user. You can see it's got Eden at my environment. Now what we can do is go the next level. I'm going to copy this action and copy the log action. Now I'm actually going to change this lookup. Again, I'm going to do a list lookup. I'm going to go to the managers list. I'm going to pull out the manager, but this time, rather than looking at the initiator, I'm going to insert my variable. So basically, I've run this workflow and it goes and grabs my manager, which at this day, in this example, is Eden, and it's stored in this text manager. Now I'm going to pull out Eden's manager. So let's save that, publish it. Actually, before we do that, we'll change this and say the manager's manager is. Okay. Now let's publish this out. And again, we're going to run this workflow and make sure that it's actually doing what we expect it to be doing. Okay, now that's published. Let's jump back to this list, and we're going to run this workflow again. Go back to the workflow history. You can see it's running. And we'll refresh a couple of times, so it's going to have to do some queries on that list to actually pull that data out. And now that we've done our refresh, we can see Vadim Tabakman's manager is, and you can see it's got Eden's email address in there, and then the manager's manager is, and if you look at this, it now says Brett. So you can see how you can really build a process that actually goes up the manager chain from the data in a particular list. Now this gives you an idea of how to get information from one list. There are other ways. There's the query list action that you're able to use. But if you simply want to pull out one field or maybe a couple of fields, it'll probably be a lot easier just to use the set workflow variable action to do that sort of list lookup. Hopefully this is helpful to you guys. Just so you know, this is not just for getting managers. You can get all sorts of information from lists that you may be storing. So this is a very handy and quick way of getting that data out and being able to use that throughout your workflow. As always, if you have any comments, feel free to post them at the bottom of this blog post. And thanks for watching in.